The lights of late-night television flickered as Jimmy Kimmel's monologue took a sharp turn into political controversy. It was an otherwise routine night, laughs, satire, and playful jabs at Washington's elite, until Kimmel leaned forward, the grin on his face fading just slightly. "Ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe what's happening at the White House. Our dear friend Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary, who somehow manages to keep a straight face while defending, well, everything has been caught in a bit of a pickle." The audience chuckled, but there was an underlying tension in the room. Kimmel continued, his voice laced with mischief. "Sources tell us that the press secretary, who, by the way, I imagine has a framed picture of Sean Spicer on her nightstand, has been involved in something, let's say, less than ethical. A leaked document suggests that she has been directly influencing what reporters can and cannot ask during press briefings. And if that's true, it's a pretty big deal, folks." The audience gasped. The monologue went on, laced with sarcasm, humor, and a pointed critique of the administration. It wasn't unusual for Kimmel to take shots at the White House, but this time it felt different. This wasn't just a joke. It was an accusation. Karoline Leavitt, watching the clip in real time from the comfort of her Washington, D.C. apartment, felt her stomach tighten. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Reporters, colleagues, even friends, all demanding a response. The accusations were outrageous, but the public had already taken the bait. Within minutes, Twitter was ablaze. #LeavittLeaks trended as journalists and political commentators speculated about the so-called leaked document. Some called for investigations. Others dismissed it as another smear campaign. But Karoline knew one thing for sure: this couldn't go unanswered. She picked up her phone, took a deep breath, and dialed a number she never thought she'd use. "Get me on Kimmel's show." Karoline Leavitt sat in her dimly lit apartment, her phone pressed firmly to her ear as she made the call that would change the course of the controversy. On the other end was a seasoned producer from Jimmy Kimmel Live, a man who had fielded countless requests from politicians, celebrities, and scandal-ridden public figures. But this was different. "You want to come on the show?" the producer asked, unable to hide his surprise. "Yes," Karoline said, her voice steady. "Live. No pre-recording. No edits. If Jimmy Kimmel wants to throw accusations at me, I'll face him and set the record straight myself." The producer hesitated. Having a sitting White House press secretary on a late-night show, especially in the middle of a political firestorm, was unheard of. The drama, the ratings, the sheer unpredictability of it all made for TV gold. After a brief pause, he finally said, "Let me talk to Kimmel, but I think we can make this happen." Karoline ended the call, her mind racing. She had spent her entire career navigating the media, mastering the art of public relations, and controlling narratives. But this was a full-blown PR crisis, and it was personal. She opened Twitter and typed out a message. "See you soon at Jimmy Kimmel Live. Let's talk facts. #NoSpin, #Leavitt Speaks." Within seconds, her tweet exploded. Political analysts, late-night fans, and journalists were stunned. CNN's breaking news banner flashed. "White House press secretary accepts Kimmel's challenge. Going live." Fox News ran their own spin. "Leavitt two-face Hollywood elites. Defends the administration live on TV." Meanwhile, in the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio, the news reached Kimmel himself. The host, who had spent years skewering politicians from the safety of his monologue desk, now found himself in an unusual position, face-to-face with the subject of his jokes. His writers scrambled. The usual script was out the window. This wasn't going to be just another comedy segment. This was a showdown. The stage was set. The country was watching, and Karoline Leavitt was ready for battle. The energy inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was electric. The audience, buzzing with anticipation, filled every seat. Social media was in a frenzy. Half the country wanted to see Karoline Leavitt crash and burn, while the other half saw her as a warrior stepping into enemy territory. Backstage, Karoline adjusted the lapel of her tailored navy blue blazer, her expression unreadable. She had done countless press briefings under pressure, but this was different. Late-night television wasn't the White House press room. The rules were different. The crowd wouldn't be neutral. Kimmel controlled the narrative here, or so he thought. A stagehand approached. 5 minutes, Ms. Leavitt. She nodded, took a deep breath, and waited. Meanwhile, on stage, Jimmy Kimmel was in his element. The crowd roared as he delivered a few last-minute jokes, setting the tone for what was to come. All right, folks, we've had some wild guests on this show. Actors, musicians, even politicians. But tonight, we have someone who usually prefers to be behind the podium, dodging questions instead of answering them. Laughter erupted. Please welcome the White House Press Secretary, Karoline Leavitt. The applause was loud, but mixed with audible boos. As Karoline walked onto the stage, she maintained her composure, smiling as she shook Kimmel's hand. She took her seat, crossing her legs and leaning slightly forward, projecting confidence. Kimmel wasted no time. So, Karoline, let's get right into it. You're here because, well, I accused you of something pretty serious last night. The whole country is talking about it. So, are you here to admit I was right? Laughter rippled through the audience. Karoline smiled but didn't take the bait. Jimmy, I think we both know that late-night TV is great at one thing, entertaining. But the truth? That's another story. And I'm here to set the record straight. The audience murmured. Kimmel leaned back, arms crossed, amused. All right then, let's talk facts. Did you or did you not control which reporters get to ask questions at the White House briefings? And did you pressure them to avoid certain topics? Karoline didn't flinch. Let's talk about that so-called leaked document you mentioned. You based your accusation on an anonymous source. No proof, no verification. But here's what I do have, an actual copy of our press briefing protocol, publicly available for anyone to see. And guess what? Nowhere does it say we control reporters' questions. That's just another conspiracy cooked up for clicks. She reached into her blazer, pulled out a folder, and held it up. Cameras zoomed in. So tell me, Jimmy, who's your source? Or is this just another case of late-night gossip passing as news? The audience sued. Even Kimmel, a veteran at handling heated moments, momentarily hesitated. I mean, come on, he finally said, trying to regain control. The way this administration works, can you really blame people for thinking you guys manipulate the media? Karoline smirked. I could ask the same about Hollywood, but let's not go there, right? The crowd reacted loudly, some cheered, others booed. But one thing was clear, Karoline Leavitt wasn't here to play defense. The battle had only just begun. For the first time in a long while, Jimmy Kimmel found himself slightly off balance. He was used to guests laughing along, taking the jokes in stride, or stumbling under pressure. But Karoline Leavitt wasn't laughing. She wasn't stumbling. She was counterpunching. The audience was split, some enjoying the spectacle, others waiting to see if Kimmel could turn the tables. Jimmy leaned forward, smirking. All right, Karoline, let's pretend for a second that this document you brought actually proves anything. Let's say you don't control reporters. But let's talk about another issue, truthfulness. He paused, letting the words sink in. You stand up at that podium every day and defend the most controversial administration in modern history. You've had to backtrack on statements, dodge questions, and sometimes, let's be honest, say things that are, well, let's call them alternative facts. So, how can we trust you now? The audience applauded, sensing Kimmel's attempt to regain control. Karoline's expression remained neutral, but inside she felt a flicker of irritation. She had prepared for this. Jimmy, let me ask you something. When you tell jokes about politicians, do you fact-check every punchline? Or do you take creative liberties for entertainment? Kimmel opened his mouth, but Karoline kept going. Because if I were to fact-check your monologues, we'd be here all night correcting exaggerations and misleading claims. But you get away with it because, well, it's just comedy, right? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even some of Kimmel's most loyal fans shifted uncomfortably. The difference between us, Karoline continued, is that I'm held accountable for my words. Every single day. You? You get to say whatever you want, throw accusations around, and when someone calls you out, you just say, relax, it's a joke. Kimmel chuckled, trying to keep it light. You're not seriously comparing your job to mine, are you? Karoline leaned in slightly. No, Jimmy. I'm pointing out that you get to criticize from the cheap seats while I actually have to answer for the things I say. A few scattered claps came from the audience. It was clear that, whether they liked her or not, Karoline wasn't losing ground. Kimmel exhaled dramatically. Okay. You came in swinging, I'll give you that. But let me ask you something, why did you agree to come on this show? You had to know I wasn't going to make it easy for you. Karoline nodded. Of course. But I also knew that if I didn't come, you'd spend the next week saying, see? She couldn't handle it. So I figured, why not face you head on? After all, if there's one thing I learned working under President Trump, it's that you don't back down from a fight. That name, Trump, sent a wave of reaction through the audience. Cheers, boos, and laughter all mixed into one chaotic moment. Kimmel grinned. Well, I'll give you this, you definitely know how to put on a show. Karoline smirked. That's one thing we have in common. The battle was fierce, but neither had landed the knockout punch. And with every passing minute, the tension kept rising. The biggest moment of the night was still to come. The tension in the studio was thick. Karoline Leavitt and Jimmy Kimmel had traded blows for nearly 20 minutes, and the audience was on the edge of their seats. Some admired Karoline's composure, others cheered for Kimmel to land a finishing joke. But one thing was clear, this wasn't just a talk show anymore. It was a political showdown, live on national television. Kimmel leaned back, exhaling. All right, Karoline, I'll admit this has been more fun than I expected. But let's end on one final question. And I want an honest answer. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Honesty is my policy, Jimmy. A few laughs from the crowd. Kimmel nodded. Okay. You stand up at that podium every day, defending policies, dodging scandals, and putting out fires. But deep down, don't you ever feel exhausted? Like you're defending the indefensible? I mean, come on, Karoline, off the record, don't you ever look in the mirror and think, what am I even doing? The crowd erupted in applause. This was it. The moment Kimmel had been waiting for. He had framed the question in a way that put Karoline in a corner. If she hesitated, if she showed even a flicker of doubt, it would be a viral moment, one that could haunt her career. Karoline inhaled, choosing her words carefully. Jimmy, let me ask you something. You come out here every night and tell jokes, take shots at people like me, and get applause for it. But deep down, don't you ever feel exhausted? Like you're just repeating the same script, feeding people exactly what they want to hear? I mean, come on, off the record, don't you ever look in the mirror and think, am I really making a difference, or am I just another Hollywood mouthpiece? The room fell silent. For the first time all night, Kimmel didn't have a comeback. Karoline continued. The truth is, we both have jobs to do. Mine is to represent the White House. Yours is to entertain. You make people laugh, I answer to the American people. You get to sit here, throw accusations, and never have to deal with the consequences. But I do. And I accept that. Because unlike you, I don't get to hide behind a joke when things get tough. The crowd reaction was mixed, some stunned into silence, others clapping, a few booing. But one thing was clear, Karoline Leavitt had not only survived Kimmel's gauntlet, she had flipped it on him. Kimmel forced a smile. Well, Karoline, I gotta say, you came prepared. Karoline smirked. Jimmy, I always come prepared. The audience erupted, cheers, jeers, and everything in between. The interview was over, but the debate had just begun. As Karoline walked off stage, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. That was impressive. Let's talk. She stared at the message, her mind racing. Who was watching her performance tonight? A political ally? A powerful opponent? Or was this just the beginning of something much bigger? Whatever it was, Karoline knew one thing for sure. She had just changed the game.